أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا بالقاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أعلم الله أجورنا وأجوركم من مصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We stated yesterday that as you observe nature, we find that nature is always in a state of motion. And this motion is not only horizontal motion, but it's vertical motion. And by vertical motion, what we meant was a motion that is evolutionary. It goes from weakness into strength. And every level of strength retains the former state of its own self and builds upon it. The human society, human individual, and every aspect of existence does not defy this. And based on this, we find that the miracles have always attained greater sophistication as the human community has acquired greater sophistication through its evolutionary motion. Similarly, we stated that the Sharia and the Sharia laws have always modified themselves in accordance with the evolving human community. But there are principles, and the principles have always remained the same. The principle of liberation, the principle of growth. These are the salient principles. In order to accommodate these principles, the Sharia forms itself around these principles and allows the human community to grow. Now we came to a point and we stated that when the Prophet of Islam came, that was the final message delivered by God. And that was an intellectual message. There was nothing physical about it. It's all words and meanings. The Muslim community needs to awaken that the human evolution does not stop there. It has continued beyond that point. But the Quran, which was the final revelation, there is no more revelation to come after that. We gave examples from the life of Imam Sadiq Salamullah in which he re-envisages some of the things taught by the Prophet and Imam Ali in his own context, keeping the principles in mind. Now there are many examples. Now here comes the question, why isn't another prophet coming? The answer is simple. There is no scope left for another prophet. Why did prophethood terminate and why did the imams begin? The answer is simple. The answer is simple. The message is complete. The imam's role was to re-understand the message at every era, and Quran was that broadness of message, those principles. And the Qurans and the Imams understand this message in their own context from era to era. What does that really mean? What that really means is that if we understand the purpose of existence properly, we will see that the role of the Prophet was not a novel role. It was a part and parcel of human existence. Nuh could not have come to the community prior to his own community. Ibrahim could not have come to the community of Nuh. The sophistication that Ibrahim had was befitting his own community. Isa could never have succeeded in the time of Musa, and the Prophet of Islam could never have succeeded in any time prior to his, nor in any region other than the one he came to. Now the example I want to give here is, as we're going to this, is that the Prophet of Islam could only have been successful in the region in which he came. Had the Prophet of Islam come to the Persians or to the Romans, he would not have enjoyed the success that he enjoyed with the Arabs. You see, whenever an instructor instructs the students are of two types. Either those that come with background reading and who already have their learning. These are the students who will analyze the words of the instructor in their own context. And then there are students who revere the instructor to an extent that they become clean slates. And they are the ones who are able to absorb the message of the instructor fully. The Prophet of Islam came to a community that had lost a sense of human values, that was not intellectually sophisticated, yet the potential was there. And he works on that potential, and they fully absorb his message, and as a result the message flourishes and flows. Had he come to any other community, he would not have enjoyed this much success, because they would have challenged his message or would have reinterpreted in accordance with their own context and in their own learning. We see from this that the prophets have come at the right time. The right time meaning is that the human community had evolved to that level. So these prophets were not impositions. These prophets were produced through the human condition itself. Now I don't want anybody to say that, are you saying that the prophets are nothing but a human phenomena? Yes, of course I am. The prophets are human phenomena. The entirety of the beauty of human existence is within humanity. God has so much confidence in humanity that He has taken them from Adam till the last prophet, and beyond that He has so much more that He wants from humanity. What I'm trying to say here is that after the final prophet there is no scope left for any more prophets, because the purpose is the human community should arrive at such a glorious pedestal of completion that arrival at completion will be marking the complete purpose of human existence. There is no question of making the human beings obedient to the sharp edge of the sword. What does that achieve anyway? Tell me. If Mahdi were to come and through his overwhelming strength he were to make people into obedient people, what would that attain for God? Tell me. Really, God, does He need the sajdas of the sons of Adam that are being given to Him on the threat of their heads being cut? Does He need those sajdas? Surely there must be something far more profound to it than this. It's so arbitrary the way we have understood. The prophets are human phenomena. The reason why prophethood stops with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is because the real prophethood is humanity itself, the collective body of human beings and each human individual. These are the real prophets, as the Prophet himself had said, I am the outer prophet who has come to awaken the inner prophet. The whole success of prophetic missions lies in the human being becoming a worthy individual, and that is the whole purpose. Naturally. So the end of prophethood marks the beginning of greater prophethood. Now, potentially, the class has graduated. Once the class has graduated, they are supposed to take the reins of their own destiny in their own hands. They are supposed to evolve now. They are supposed to think independently. They are supposed to contribute, and they are supposed to attain the purpose. Now, here is a gross mistake that the communities of faith are making. That once the revelation has come, they see finality in the model created by the prophet. There is no finality in the world of God at all. There can never be finality. There is only one state of finality, and that is no finality. God has no end to Him. There is no ending to the world of God, nor to our motion to God. Think about this carefully. Since the time we take birth till the time we die, is there any end to our motion? In fact, the motion is so beautiful that we build on previous stages of motion and experience to arrive at a greater level of existence. At every instance we do that. God has no end to Him. Even paradise, there are 8 layers of paradise. Even in paradise there is no stopping the motion. Even when the son of Adam arrives at the fullness of paradise, Allah says, وَلَدَيْنَا مَزِيدٌ. We have more to offer, and teases the hearts even more. There is no finality. This is the mistake that the Muslim has made. That he feels, same like the Christian or the Jew, that the model established by the prophets is the model, that is the ideal model. What they fail to understand is that that was a particular rank of human evolution. And that's when the message came. And the human evolution did not stop, it continued. In fact, by priority, there has been more growth since the time of the Prophet than ever before. In the last century, the way the human beings have evolved technologically is unbelievable. The way our understanding of the universe has changed from, in the last few centuries, from the Newtonian mechanical universe to Einstein's universe to the quantum universe now, where nothing is fixed and everything is changing. The way we have evolved is phenomenal. How can anybody deny this evolution? But the beauty is that the principles supplied by the Quran, which are actually in sync with existence and human nature, are sufficiently vague and ambiguous for variety of interpretations to exist. Where are we going with all of this? You might ask yourself. What I'm saying here is that the Muslim mind is of this understanding, that the 12th Imam will come and cause a reversion to the model of the Prophet. That is true, a reversion, but not in the way that we have understood. He will not go back to sitting on camels, will he? I certainly hope not. He will not go back to wearing the long moustaches. I certainly hope not. What will he go back? He will go back to that particular model that the Prophet had created, in which human beings were liberated and allowed to fulfill their potential and were set on the path of motion. He will go back to that model. But it does not mean that the economic system that was there would be enacted once again. When the Prophet came, he did not come outside a context. There was contract law already existing before the Prophet came. There were conventions, there were traditions. The Prophet operated in all of this. He modified some, he introduced some. Some he forbade certain cultures. But majority of the time he worked with the cultures that were there and the conventions that were already there. Even the language that the Prophet spoke was a language that predated him. He came into a given context. And then he allowed that context to allow the human being to flourish and to evolve. What we are saying here is that evolution should never stop. And the message of God should encourage evolution and should have sufficient within itself, sufficient force within itself to impel this growth and evolution. Now, if you look at the Imams' lives, and I'm going to give an example for this, as we develop this particular theme. If you look at the Prophet when he came and the law of Khums was introduced, in Surah Anfal, whatever ghanima you have, فَخُمُسُهُ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ, whatever you have in that verse, and that verse has been repeated twice in the Quran in the same fashion, once in Khums and once in Anfal, in the meaning of receiving whatever we receive. Now, before the Prophet came, the Arab chief used to take 1/4 of everything gotten by his tribes. The Prophet came and it was reduced to a fifth as opposed to a fourth. And it was distributed in a greater sense than the Prophet, than it was distributed before the Prophet. Now, Imam Ali came and he said, look, I pardon my share of khums, which is 3 shares. Imam Baqir came and he introduced khums upon, and levied khums upon items upon which khums was not levied before. And Imam Baqir explained, he said, I have to do this for a year to see to the needs of the community. I have pardoned you my share, as did Imam Ali, and I am levying khums on this and this items in order to cater for the needs of the community. What do we understand by this? We understand that khums was a tax, a state tax through which the state provided services for the people. And as the needs increased, the taxation fluctuated. It can decrease and it can increase. It was as ordinary as that. It was a human principle that we need to cater for the growing needs of the community, and there was no value as such to a percentage stipulated by the Quran. There was no value in the percentage stipulated. The value was in what? Was in the central service that the khums was providing. And that was being changed by the imams in their own context. And that's why we are saying there is no need for another prophet. This prophet has to arrive to the fore from within himself. And the Quran is sufficiently ambiguous for the human motion to be accommodated by the Quran in a meaningful way based upon its principles. So if we are seeing this in the life of the imams, this fluctuation of the interpretation of the law and theology being expressed in different ways, then we should know from that that the imams are being true to the whole process of evolution. Now, Mahdi, when he comes, he will not revert to the Prophet in the sense of how Prophet physically established the law, but in the sense of the ethos of the Prophet. When the Imam comes, it will be a highly evolved state of human existence in which Islam will be catering meaningfully for that existence. However, that imposes a duty upon me and you today. Let us examine the history. After the occultation of the 12th Imam, our ulama initially were burying the khums. Why? Because they said the 12th Imam will come and retrieve this money and spend it and utilize it because it is his right. After they buried the money for an era, they thought, well, the Imam hasn't come, but the needs of the community are there. So instead of burying the money, let us spend the money in the way of the Imam. If this is not evolution, then what is evolution? But then there comes this stagnant point in the minds of the people in which they say, no, khums has to be 20%, it has to be given in this way with qurbatillah niyat. There is no niyyah associated with khums, it's a tax. We need to give it, but we did not evolve further than that. However, we are seeing evolution in action. Similarly, look at every aspect of human existence. We have evolved at every rank. The only problem that has come is in this backward thinking, that the finality of the prophethood means that that is the most accurate model. It is the most accurate model in its own context, based on the principles upon which the prophet fashioned his own context. But our context is different. We need to look at those principles once again and refashion the whole thing in accordance with our context and in accordance with our evolution and allow for greater motion. Now, the Muslims today, they reject anything that comes from the West. If we look at the human evolution, we see monarchies changing hands with feudalism, changing hands with communist economies and social systems, changing hands with capitalist democracies and economies. The Muslim has always been opposed to anything of the sort and has always said that Islam provides the best answers. This is the failure of the Muslim mind. Islam does not have a fixed economic theory, nor a social theory, nor a political governance theory. It cannot have it. It's impossible to have it. Because, and as we'll explain in the next one or two lectures, due to the relativity and individuality principles, every era has a different understanding of economy, of how society ought to work. If you look at the time of Adam, there wasn't a society beyond the domestic environment, beyond the domestic setting of Adam himself. But in the time of Ibrahim, there are communities of different faith, different nations. They are interacting. Adam's model could never work in the time of Ibrahim. So if Adam had brought hard and fast rules that were to be followed in the form, it would have never worked. But Adam operated on principles. The same principles were reformulated in a system in the time of Ibrahim, and that's why they worked. The same is the thing with us today. Quran can never have an economy, a politics, a sociology. It can't have it. The only thing the Quran can teach us is, through its own examples, are the broad principles that accommodate growth and righteousness. And they need to be fashioned. What I'm trying to say here is that if a community has evolved to a level where they have upheld the capitalistic model based on fair principles, then that is as godly as any other model, provided that as soon as the human community evolves, that model is changed to a better one. The onus was upon the Muslims from the very first day that they should think and evolve and grow, and not to stagnate and not to react against everything that is coming from other than the Muslims. If you look at the Prophet's broad-mindedness, you will see that when when a Persian came, they used to wear the long Arabic clothes. And I'm going to give a very mundane example. They used to wear very long Arabic clothes. And a Persian came wearing trousers or something resembling the trousers. The Arabs frowned upon it. The Prophet said, no, it's a very dignified dress. Adopt it to your own selves. Start wearing it. It's a very good dress. The Prophet had a very broad mind. Similarly, when we look at the Imam's actions, we will find that they never hesitated in looking at the good outside the folds of Islam and taking it on board and using it. Same is the system with the Khulafa. If you look at the Khulafa, when they came in, they did not have a fixed system, but with the conquests came in new learning. They actually took on the new learning and they used the new models of governance. It was always like this. There was no such thing as this is Islam and this is other than Islam. It was always an evolutionary trend. What has happened has been after that the Muslim has become wishful in his thinking. And he wants to revert to the example of the Prophet, whereas the example of the Prophet in principle is the example, not in form. The onus is on the Muslim that after the occultation of the 12th Imam, they ought to have evolved. The Muslims should have contributed to the world at large, talking about fair economy, a righteous social system, a proper means of governance. But the Muslim has not evolved in his mind due to his bleak outlook and a failure in the way in which he has understood Islam altogether. Now, on that note, if we look at our situation today, and in fact this will become clearer in the next few days when we explain more, the whole of these notions that we have in Islam that have become very, very regressive as opposed to them being those very principles that add to our growth. For example, let us look at the notion of riba, or what we call usury interest. Today, the Muslim says, is interest permissible or not? What he fails to understand is that first and foremost, the designation might be the same, the value might be different altogether. I'll ask a simple question, and then you respond. Does it make sense, and I'm talking from the British context, does it make sense that a person pays rent
for 60 years, dies without owning a house? Or is it better for a person to take a loan, pay it back in 20 years, which is less than the mortgage that he will pay, and on top of that will own a house that he will leave behind for his children? What makes more sense? Now today, if Islam were to have come today, and the Prophet were to have said, interest is haram, wouldn't we, as free-minded people, ask the Prophet based on what? What you're saying doesn't make sense. Because taking a loan from the building society or a bank and paying it back over 20 years is far better than paying rent for 60 years and dying poor. But when the Prophet said that interest is haram and Allah and the Prophet are at war with people who take interest, back in the day nobody objected. Why didn't they object? Because it made perfect sense to them that interest was socially damaging. It was socially harmful. But this interest, in many ways, now I'm not talking about the interest that the World Bank uses, nor the credit card. I'm talking about certain forms of interest that me and you are the people who often encounter in our daily lives. That interest is socially productive. What does that show? It shows that the name interest is the same, but the principles governing the law of interest back in the day, in the time of the Prophet, which was mentioned in the Quran, was a very different principle to the one we understand today. That was socially harmful. I don't know how many of you are Indian here, and how many of you have watched the movie Mother India. Has anybody watched it? Yeah? Only one or two. Now, the interest that was practiced by the Arabs was the interest of the sort that was there in Mother India, where the initial sum and the interest that is set, and when that is not paid, the compound sum forms the new original sum, and the interest is levied on that. And what happens is that a person borrows £100 or $100, and for the rest of their lives they keep on paying interest on that $100 because the $100 keep on multiplying. So you begin, the initial sum that you borrow is $100. By the end of your life, you've got $10,000 that you have to pay back. That was the corruptive interest that the Prophet stood against, not this socially productive interest. But the Muslim mind has failed to understand this. Through the whole process of evolution, what we are supposed to do is, we are supposed to understand that there have been principles in the Quran. There has been finality to the Prophet. We replace the Prophet now in the collective state. That doesn't mean we are prophets. Please don't misread what I'm saying, yes? Or misunderstand. I'm using these terms very, very loosely in order to convey a central theme. The 12th Imam is the glorious height of human completion, but he cannot come until the human being arrives at that pedestal of completion. He can't come and force a child to mature overnight. Can you see that? He will come to receive adults who are mature, who are liberated, who are thinking. But he cannot come and force a child to become an adult with his experiences overnight. The child has to grow before that glorious father of humanity can come back, yes? So therefore there's a real story, there's a real purpose in me and you for growing. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. Similarly, as I said, in the next 1 or 2 days it will become clear. The Prophet set the laws of inheritance within the Quran. Why were the laws of inheritance set? To safeguard the needs of the people, and in order to allow them to smoothly grow. Now a woman is provided for, yes? A woman is provided for in the Muslim community. If the woman is provided for, not as a favor, but as her right, she does not deserve the level of inheritance that a man deserves. She does not provide for anybody. She is provided for from her birth till her death. So the woman ends up with far greater capital than a man, because as soon as a man inherits something, he has to provide for his dependents. The woman is not obliged to provide for anybody, and she can invest and she can earn. 2, the law of the blood money. When a woman is killed, her price is half of that of a man. The simple reason being that a woman is a carer, the man is a provider. Now, in this part of the world, where the woman is both a carer and a provider, and she is not being provided for, tell me, the inheritance for a woman should it not be double that of a man, if not equal? Because she is not only caring, she is providing. Not only that, she is not being provided for. So her inheritance should be equal, if not double, to that of a man. Now you might find this all a bit alien and shocking. Think about what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the ideal situation is in which a woman should provide. For my personal self, I feel the ideal situation is that a woman should not be given the burden of earning and providing. It should be a choice for her to earn, because she is the agency of the mercy of God, and she instills humanity within otherwise flesh and bone. Yes? This is how profound a woman is. Her role as a mother is the most profound role ever, and should never be compromised. She should never have the onus of earning and providing. But Islam, we will see, is a very pragmatic way of life. It looks at life as it is. Here, when we're looking at this, we are seeing that if human beings evolve naturally, and if they had the confidence in their God, they would have used the Quran as a set of principles that can be fashioned and refashioned. What did the Prophet say? I will remind ourselves of yesterday's talk. The Prophet said, I leave with you two weighty things, the Book of Allah and my itra, my family. And of the two, the weightier one is the Book of Allah. Why did he say this? We explained this yesterday. Because the Book of Allah provides those universal principles. And the itra, what are they doing? They are interpreting those principles in any given era, and hence we see the fluctuations in the interpretations. The Prophet interpreted khums in a way that he did. Ali ibn Abi Talib forgave his share. Imam Bakir increased the levy of khums on other items. Why are they changing it? Because they are looking at it in their own context of evolution and growth. Whereas the Quran supplies those general principles and general ethos. If we understand these principles, and I want to talk about one little thing before our time finishes today. If we understand these principles, then in that case this community becomes a productive community. A community that is growing and that is audacious and that is bold. It is not caught up in this dilemma that it has. That no, Islam says this and we are facing this. And would not become stagnant nor regressive, neither in its thought nor in the application of those principles. It would become a very dynamic community that actually provides a sense of relief through the revelation, not a sense of stagnation through the revelation. Today, the Muslim community, and I want you to think about this very, very carefully, this humble slave of Allah asks his brothers and sisters to think about what he is saying. Today, is Islam a force of social goodness within the Muslims? Or is it a force in which it alienates the Muslims from the goodness that the society has at large? Because at every point, we find that Islam becomes an obstacle from sharing and from progressing. Tell me, why have we not produced astronauts? Why have we not produced scientists? Why have we not produced geniuses? Do our skulls not have the same grey matter as anybody else's skull has? On the contrary, we have got the Quran. We have got the example of the Prophet and the Imams. We have got the most beautiful spirituality of the Imams. Despite that, we are not producing anything. Yes, we are producing, but not in that meaningful way that the world stands and salutes. The world has evolved. The Muslim mind has stagnated. Today, this is the land of the free. These people have demonstrated something that is truly human. I hope I don't get into trouble about saying this. A black man is the head of the most powerful nation of the world. From where to where? From apartheid, where they were sitting at the back of the buses, to a place now where he is heading this state. From a time when they were imported into this country as slaves, to a time when he is ruling this country. What a wonderful thing that they have displayed. Through evolution, through growth. How many Muslims are in Congress? 2. 1? 2. From 6 million Muslims? And why aren't they in Congress? How many Muslims are in social services here? Why is there this state in which we are ostracizing ourselves? Why not full engagement within the state in which we exist? Why isn't there this want to contribute to the society at large, to share the good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us with our brethren at large? Why isn't there this notion in our minds that we are all evolving? Why don't we have these beautiful human sentiments that we are one human family? Why don't we have this confidence that whatever the other has is not the other, it is mine, it's my heritage? Why should we have this notion of the other in the first place? Why hasn't the Muslim mind arrived at that glorious pedestal? Why hasn't it evolved? Why does it lack that confidence? Why is the Muslim mind still today talking about cutting hands and stoning people to death? Where does it say in the Quran, I'll ask, where does it say in the Quran that stone somebody to death? Where? The Prophet formulated that law, yes, in accordance with his own context. But the principle of the Quran does not state stoning anywhere, does it? Where is stoning in the Quran? By the way, take this as a jest. I'm saying it from before, right? Take it as a jest, as soon as people don't know when I'm joking. In a Shia community, you can get away with saying anything about the Quran, because they don't read the Quran. And whenever Shia says it's in the Quran, the best way to defeat him to say, where is it in the Quran? You know, so anyway, check it, it's not in the Quran. Stoning is not in the Quran, right? And then we're talking about cutting hands off. I mean, think about this. Think about this. I'm going to explain this further in the next few days, yes? Cutting hands off. Why did the Prophet say in the Quran, why did God say in the Quran to cut the hand off anyway? Why? Because he has something about seeing limbs decapitated. I mean, if today a thief's hand were cut, right? He can legitimately go to the hospital and have them stitched back. You know that there's no law preventing a person from stitching back their fingers, yes? And in the next 20 years, when we can genetically regrow our limbs, you can cut a thief's hand in one room, he goes into the next room and choop, his fingers are back, and back into the shop stealing. And to make the system worse, there is nothing against giving them anesthetic. So right, you've been guilty of theft. Get this anesthetic, fine, we're cutting your hand off, go into the other room, have your hand back, go back and steal. Are you seeing? Does it really make sense? Or people, and I know for this you're going to crucify me and stone me to death even if it's not in the Quran. People, tomorrow is it Eid or is it a fast? What do I do? Great dilemma. Why don't I sit in my Bentley? You guys don't have Bentleys here? It's a beautiful car, British, I good cars. Let's talk about Mercs, or is that German? Which is your equivalent? Yeah, Ford. Let's sit in our Lexuses and go 28 miles and break the fast and come back. Now this is the greatest nonsense ever. We sit in our very comfortable cars with our ACs on, drive 28 miles, and that drive actually relaxes us. Go to 28 miles, have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. I had to put the cigarette bit in. And then come back and I'm not fasting now. Seriously, God does not allow you to fast here, but go 28 miles luxuriously, and at that service station God says, it's okay, now you can eat, I will not kill you for this. But if you had ate in your house without going 28 miles, I would have put you in hell. Seriously, Is this really what it's all about? The evolution, the growth, the whole thing changes. And we should have that confidence. You see, the reason the 12th Imam is not coming is because we are still like this. And he can't come. For him, it's a waste of time to come. For him, because he is the father of this beautiful community, for him it's a question of, my children will awaken. The community will mature, and then I will go and receive them. But this is not the time for me to receive them because they are nowhere. Now, when we evolve, we become greater beings, and Allah encourages that motion. The mistake we are making is we are looking at the time of the Prophet and we are saying that is the ideal model. It is the ideal model in principle, not in form. The ulama's job was to explore this principle, not to get stuck on the form and lose the whole meaning. But then again, the community is severely compromised due to this sort of Islam. They can't find that they can engage in this community. I've been listening to our brothers when they come to the podium and tell us all the beautiful things that they are doing. But have you seen the level of justifications and examples they have to give in order to convince us? These are everyday normal truths. Why should anybody need to come to the podium and explain to us painstakingly for 20 minutes in order to convince us to engage in the wider society is a legitimate thing to do? The very fact that they need to do this shows that we are opposed to it subconsciously. There is something in there, there's a mental blockage in there that doesn't allow us to accept this and makes us see this as something new, so that they have to make a case to convince us, whereas it's an ordinary part of human life. It's something with which we should be born. That care for the other, sharing of the good, learning from the other is a part and parcel of human life. And this is what evolution and growth is all about. Now, as I want to give one more example, change is a norm. We have to embrace change. We cannot resist change. Everything is changing. And we may talk about this a little bit more. Yes, but we have quite a bit of ground to cover. Change has to be embraced. Our failure is not evolving, not acknowledging change. If I pick on fatwas, then it's only because I come from that tradition myself, yes? I don't mean to demean anybody or anything. It's just because I come from that tradition myself, yes? So take it in the right way. If you look at the fatwa of the recent contemporaries who are not alive now, recent contemporaries, the giants, the masters, they would say that you cannot refer to a non-Muslim judicial system to retrieve your right. If you were to do so, it would be a sin. And if you were to get an injunction in your favor, and if you were to take your right, it would be haram for you to take it. Based on what? Based on the verse of the Quran. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ فَاسِقُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ كَافِرُونَ. The verses have come very strong. And he who does not adjudicate by what Allah has revealed, these are the corrupt people, these are the non-believers, so on and so forth. Now those verses are very strong. But look at it carefully. Look at it very, very carefully. Back in the day, in the time of the Prophet, the paradigm was totally different. The paradigm was one of a Muslim world, a world that was enjoying protection of Islam, the Christians and the Jews, a world that was at peace with Islam, and a world that was the antagonizer of Islam and the enemy of Islam. And those verses clearly marked that the people within the folds of Islam should abide by the laws of Islam and not by the laws of the antagonists of Islam. In today's world, that paradigm has changed altogether. The world geography is not based on religious lines. That this is a religious Islam and this is the enemy of Islam. These are international democracies. In international democracy, those verses do not mean what they meant back in the day. We can't use those verses and apply them today and say you can't go to the court of law to retrieve your right. We are in this country, we are following a just judicial system. Of course we have a God-given right to go to the law system and retrieve our rights. But this is what I mean. The failure to embrace change, to see that the paradigm has shifted altogether. And I'll give you one more example that I gave otherwise. The fatwas that came out, that we can steal from a non-Muslim country and non-Muslim people, even if we live there. These were based on the paradigm of Islam and the enemies of Islam. These are not based on the modern paradigm. This was the failure of our ulama to see a very evolved state, and a failure to evolve in their thoughts, and a failure to observe this change of paradigm. Mahdi, when he comes, he will be a very real human being who will have a real sense of the world as it is, and a sense of global humanity, and a sense of fair play across the board. I'll just repeat this once more. The whole of the human trend is one of evolution, is one of change. Mahdiism at present means having that confidence in our God, embracing this change, seeing the truth for what it is worth, and evolving with it. And that is the only way we can enact living presence of Mahdiism, and that's the only way we can move to that newer pedestal of accepting Him. Evolution obviously also occurs at the level of the heart and the mind. You see, a person who reads Dua Kumail at the age of 20, if that person becomes 40 and reads Dua Kumail, it should mean something else altogether. Because now there are added experiences. Trials of life have tempered with his soul and have brought about a different person. When a 20-year says, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, he's trying to think in his mind, what does Rabb mean? A 40-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 70-year-old, when they hold out their hands and they say, Ya Rabb, the soul has evolved to a degree that the throne of Allah begins to tremble and shake under the weight of the plea coming from the depth of this broken heart. When this old man raises his hands, he knows, I have no one save my God. As opposed to a young man who feels that the whole world is in his control. When he becomes 60 or 70, he knows it was only my Lord from the beginning till the end. That is the spiritual evolution. We find this beautiful evolution in the flock of Al-Hussein, in his band, in the people with him, the most refined souls, the most beautiful souls. How amazing is this, that 72 or 150 people impact such a change that has moved humanity for the last 1,400 years. But I want to go a step beyond. And I want to say, it was difficult for Hussein to do what he did. It wasn't easy for Hussein to extract a dagger from the chest of his youthful son. It wasn't easy for Hussein to look at his Abbas with his arms torn from his body. It wasn't easy for Hussein to present Asghar to a treacherous arrow. It was very difficult. But I will say, and be truthful to yourselves, is it easier to give all these lives and die after them immediately, or is it easier or harder to observe the killing of all these people and living beyond it with the memories? It is these women in Karbala who are the true masters of humanity, who are the true champions, who are the true souls of God, and who are the lights of Allah. Zainab, Layla, Rubab, They are seeing their children in front of their eyes. They are seeing Hussein in front of their eyes for as long as they are alive. And they are not allowed to sip the pleasurable sips of death and to join Allah. These are the true souls. Zainab comes to her children, summons them. At what time? At a time when Hussein's army has fallen. In the morning, the whole army is engaged in mutual combat. But Hussein's numbers were scarce and they fell very quickly. Arabs had traditions in war that they would either engage the whole armies together or there would be single combat, one to one. Zainab, seeing that Hussein's army has now fallen, these are the descriptions we find. She calls On and Muhammad into the tent. She combs their hair, applies collyrium to their eyes, changes their garments. I will say, "Oh Zainab, what is this that you do? You are sending them out for death and in this state?" "Silence, O man," she will reply. "I give them for my brother." And she says, "Oh children, go and ask your uncle for permission." She says, "Wait, O children. If you see Umar ibn Saad, kill him. If you get to the Al-Qamah, don't drink water. Now go." They went. Zainab is in her tent. She hears nothing from them. "Fizza, summon my children." They are summoned. "Oh children, I hear such and such has been killed, such and such has been killed, and you are still alive?" "Oh mother, rage not. Whenever we go to our uncle, he turns his face away. We turn to him and he cries out, 'Wa ghurbata,' and his eyes flood with tears. Fizza, call my brother to me." Fizza goes. "Your sister summons you, O Hussein." Hussein goes inside the tent. Zainab, we hear, she places her arms in the neck of Hussein. And she says, "Dear brother, look at me." Hussein looks at Zainab. How should I respond to our mother on the day of Qiyamah? Accept them, O Hussein, and let them be. "Oh sister, I feel embarrassment from Abdullah. What will he say to me?" "Oh brother, he has sent them to be sacrificed for you. Let them go, oh brother." This is the description we find, that On and Muhammad ascend their steeds. They go forward within the battlefield. Hussein stands on top of a hill. Abbas stands with Hussein to observe their battle. As On and Muhammad appear within the battlefield, Ibn Sa'd calls out, "I am baffled at the love this sister has for her brother. She has sent the apples of her eyes to be mutilated in front of her own eyes." On and Muhammad engage. As they engage in battle, we are told that Abbas is instructing them, "O children, look behind you, look to your right, look ahead of you, turn your faces this way, strike in that way." On is struck upon his head. As On is struck upon his head, he descends to the ground. Muhammad rushes to him, carries the head of On and says, "Oh brother, I am soon to join you." As he calls out to his brother, he too is struck. When he is struck, this is how the scene is described. That Hussein is standing on top of the hill. Fizza at the door of the tent. Zainab upon her prayer mat. Hussein sits down upon the hill. Fizza falls at the door of the tent. Zainab goes into prostration and thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hamid ibn Muslim describes, Hussein runs to the battlefield. He holds the two children, and the way in which their bodies have been cut is such that Hussein holds On in one arm and Muhammad in another. As he brings them back to the tent, Zainab would always be the first one to receive the shaheed. And behind her would be other women. Hussein comes towards the tent. Zainab is not to be seen anywhere. Hussein is baffled. Where is Zainab? Abbas Qummi states that Zainab did not want to cause embarrassment to the heart of Hussein by looking at her. Yet again, when Akbar has fallen, before Hussein could get there, Zainab was on his body before Hussein. Come with me. It is the 11th of Muharram. Hamid ibn Muslim states, it is a scene of devastation. There is no body, but I find somebody lamenting upon it. Mothers embracing their children, sisters their brothers. I found 2 young bodies, and there was nobody attending to them. I said, oh women, are these 2 yatim? Do they not have a guardian? I was told, silence, Hamid. These are the 2 sons of Zainab. But where is Zainab, I asked. Go to her brother and you shall find her. I rushed to Zainab in the embrace of Hussein. I said, dear lady, shall you not spare a tear for your own children? Oh Hamid, ask me not about them. I have given them away for my Hussein.
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. مات مع Hussein.